Today, I'm going to show you how to make a wine gift bag with a drawstring. I'd previously done a tutorial for how to do a reversible wine bag where you would just tie a bow around it, but I've had a couple requests for how to do it with a drawstring. This is going to have a box bottom, which makes it nice and easy to put together. It is going to be lined, but it isn't reversible because the drawstring comes out on one side. So let's get started. Let's talk about the supplies we need to make this drawstring wine bag. First, you're going to need your basic sewing supplies, a ruler, cutting mat, rotary cutter. I also like to use this little square. I'll show you what we're going to use that for in a moment. Pins or clips, totally up to you, whichever you prefer. I'm going to do most of my sewing with white thread, but then I also do like to match my top and bobbin threads to my fabric so that when we're sewing the drawstring channel, it kind of blends in and doesn't stick out from the fabric. Then we need a safety pin and some cord, or you can also use twine or ribbon, totally up to you what you want to use. Finally, you're going to need a heat erasable pen, or you can also use chalk. I am just a huge fan of these and think every sewist should have that in their stockpile. Oh, also a seam ripper. So let's move some things and I will show you how to get started with the fabrics. For each wine bag, you're going to need 4 pieces of fabric. Each are 6.5 inches wide by 16 inches tall. This will make the bag stop basically at the top of an average wine bottle. If you want it to be taller, just make it 17, 18, however many inches, just add inches here, not to the width. If you are using a directional fabric, make sure your direction is going up and down in the long direction, because if we had cut it the other way, we would have flowers going sideways on the wine bag. Not quite as nice. This is going to be the lining. I just decided that I wanted my lining stripes to be going horizontally. They could also go vertically. So take direction into consideration when you are choosing your fabrics. Now I'm going to place these right sides together, making sure the direction is the same. So we don't want one side to have the flowers upside down and one side to have them right side up. We want them in the same direction. And then we are going to place them right sides together. Now, because this is the top, I'm going to flip it around so it is easier for me to draw and cut out the notches that we're going to be doing for the boxed bottom. There's 2 ways to do boxed bottom. You can cut notches, you can just sew it together, flatten it, and then cut the bottom. But for this project, we are going to do it this way. We're going to cut out a 1.5 inch square from both sides on the bottom of the fabric. And I say bottom because, again, I'm using directional fabric, so I have to be very aware of the direction so that I don't have flowers upside down on my finished wine bag. So I'm just using this heat erasable pen, drawing these 2 squares, and then I'm going to take scissors and I'm going to cut that out. Do you have a preferred way to make box bottoms? Either basically pre-cutting it or doing it after you have sewn your bag together? Let me know in the comments what you prefer. I kind of go back and forth, but I do like this way because it's going to make it really easy in the step where we're putting that box together. So this is the outside, and I'm just going to use clips, and I'm going to clip this together. We are going to sew both of these long sides and across here. We are not going to sew in these notches yet. We are not going to sew across the top. Now I'm going to do the same thing with my lining fabric. I'm going to put right sides together. I'm going to draw the little notches that we need to cut out to make that box bottom, and then I'm going to cut those out. I prefer to cut these notches with scissors because if you use a rotary cutter and overcut a little bit too much, you may cut into part of the bag. So I prefer to have it not as perfect, but not go past these points. Now, because this is the lining and the way we're going to put this together, I want to make sure on one of the long sides, I leave about 3 inches open for turning. And I like to do that about 1.5 inches to 2 inches up from the bottom where the notch starts. So I'm just going to draw a line there and there. That's 3 inches apart so that I know not to sew this section. Now I'm going to clip this together and then we will get this to the sewing machine. Now I'm going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam. So I sewed down the sides and across the bottom, leaving a space open for turning on the lining. And then I have also pressed the seams open, and I pressed just like it was sewn where that is open. So now it is time to turn these notches into boxed corners. So what you're going to do is you're going to grab both sides of your fabric right by that corner, and you're going to pull out. And you'll notice that it just pops right from this cut corner to a straight line. You're going to match the seams and pin or clip. And then you can pin or clip the two sides if you want to. It's pretty short, so it's pretty easy to just make sure that's lined up at your sewing machine. Totally up to you. So you're gonna do that for all 4 boxed corners, making sure that you open that seam. This is why I really do like to do box bottoms like this if you're going to have seams on both sides, because it just automatically lines right up. You don't have to flatten it, make sure things are straight. When I did the reversible wine bag, we did the box bottoms a little bit different because we used one piece of fabric for the outside and one piece of fabric for the lining, and we just folded it over, so there was only one seam. So when you have a fold on one side and a seam on the other side, this method doesn't work as well because one side is it's not going to pop straight and have everything line up properly. Now I'm going to take this back to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam along all 4 of those box bottoms. Moving right along, we have our 2 bags sewn together, so the lining and the outside. Now we are going to leave the lining wrong side out. We are going to turn the outside right side out, and then I'm going to put the outer fabric inside the lining fabric, and we are going to line up the seams on both sides. You don't have to be super precise down here. We're focusing on this top edge, which is what we are going to sew together next. So I'm just going to start by matching the seams. And then you're just going to match this raw edge and pin or clip around. It's this edge that we're focused on. Now I'm going to take it back to my sewing machine. I'm going to sew all the way around. Don't have to leave any opening because we have the opening down here in the lining for turning. I sewed all the way around the top, leaving no opening. Now I'm going to find the seam that has an opening in the lining, and we are going to turn this right side out. Next, you're ready to close this opening. You can either hand stitch it, or you can just fold this and just run a quick stitch on your machine really close to the edge. So you can see when I do the machine stitching, it does create a little bit of a bubble, right? It's not super flat, so it is noticeable, but again, it is going to be on the inside bottom of a not reversible wine bag. So to me, that's totally fine. If you want to hand stitch, go for it. You do you. Now we are going to just push the lining inside the outer fabric. And this is when you do want to be a little bit more careful and deliberate with opening those boxed corners of the lining. You can't see, that's what I'm doing in there with my fingers, kind of stretching that out. And now we need to just get this edge where the lining meets the outer fabric up top. So I just kind of do it with my fingers first, get that lined up. Then I'm going to press this so that it's nice, so you're not seeing the lining when you're looking at the front, and you're not seeing the front when you're looking at the lining. So once I do that, I will be right back. The next thing we need to do is sew around the bag twice to make this channel for the drawstring. And I'm just showing you one that I already made so you know what our end goal is. So we're going to have 2 inches above that kind of flops out. And that's where you'll see the lining. And then we're going to sew 3/4 inches down from there. That will fit most things. If you're using a really wide ribbon, just adjust. There are 2 ways to do it, but I'm going to show you my favorite way, which I think is the easiest. So we are going to grab a ruler, and we are going to grab our heat erasable pen again. Now, whether you draw on the outside or the inside depends on your sewing machine. If you have a removable arm, like a removable extension table that you can pull off, and you will be able to put this bag so that it goes around the table and your foot and needle go on top of the outside, you're going to draw on the outside. My machine doesn't do that, so I'm actually going to be doing this, and my foot and needle are going to be in here, and I'll flip it like that. You'll see. Because I have to do it that way, I'm going to turn it inside out again because I need the lines where I'm sewing. I just have to have this front part flat. So I'm going to line it up on my grid because my ruler is 1.5 inches and I need to mark down 2 inches. And I'm going to draw a line. Now don't freak out because what's beautiful about these pens is you can see it great to sew on. And then once we've sewn, we're just going to use heat of an iron, and that is going to disappear like magic. I absolutely love these pens. Highly recommend you get the variety pack with multiple colors if you don't have any of these, because sometimes colors like this doesn't show up well on a navy blue, so then I use the red because that will show up better. Because I want the stitching to just blend in with my fabric, I'm going to change my top thread to yellow. This is my best match for this. And I'm going to use this color in the bobbin that's going to disappear into the outer fabric. And that is only because of the way I'm having to sew, where I'm going like this. If your machine allows the machine to go in here and the top is here, you would put this on your top thread and whatever matches your lining as your bobbin. I'm going to start with the line closest to the top edge, just before a seam. And because the knot is going to be on the outside of my bag, I'm going to be more careful about how I start and stop here. So I'm going to line this up, put my foot down. I'm going to put my needle down, and I'm going to be holding the thread, pick the needle up, and then I'm going to give it a little pull so that I can get that bobbin thread pulled through. Sometimes it doesn't come very far, so I'm going to grab tweezers, just pull that through. Now I have both the bobbin and the top threads in my hand. I'm going to put them under the foot, and I'm going to hold them kind of tight while I start. And since I do need to go forward and back, I'm not going to really knot. I'm just going to do the forward and back right now over that seam. Now I've gotten to the second seam, so I want to make sure I remember to go forward and back just to really attach the stitches that are under the seam. Now I'm going to do the same exact thing on the second line. Again, pulling that bobbin thread up, doubling back over the seam, doubling back over the second seam as well. Now the lines we drew are still there, so all we need to do is hit those lines with a little bit of heat, just so that you can see it better. I'm going to turn it inside out again. And you might have to hold the heat on there a little bit longer when the lines are under thread and stitch marks, but it goes away really quickly. So now I'm going to turn that right side out again. And now we are going to very carefully open our drawstring channel. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your favorite seam ripper and you're going to very carefully pull out the stitches in the outer fabric in between these two stitch lines. Now you don't want to just jam in there because we do not want to pull out the stitches in the lining seaming, which are just below the stitches in the outer stitching. So careful, careful, and slow. So just slip that in there. You can push forward a little, but you can't go all the way because you don't want to rip this either. So you're just going to start to open it and then just grab one stitch at a time. So now we have our opening on the one side for the drawstring, and now we're just going to do the same thing on the other side. As I mentioned before, I'm going to use white nylon paracord, I believe they call this. So grab whatever you want to use for your drawstring and cut 2 pieces that are 19 to 20 inches long. Now I love this, but one thing you will notice if you work with it, I'll put it over the fabric so you can see it, is it will fray, but you can melt it because it's nylon. So I'm just going to take a Bic lighter, be really careful if you use fire, and just hold that flame on the end and you can see it melt. So now they're going to be good to go. Now we're going to take a safety pin. I'm just using a quilting safety pin. You can use a regular size as well. Put it through whatever drawstring you're going to use. And you can start on either side and you're just going to push that all the way through. We're going to pull it out the same side that it went in. Take the pin off. I'm going to line up those ends and then I'm just going to tie that in a knot. But you'll see with the 19 inches, your bag can lay flat and your drawstring is still going to be out. Now we're going to do the same thing with the second string, but you're going to start on the opposite side. So you're going to start and end on the side that doesn't have string coming out of it now. And now your bag is done. So you're just going to put that in there, and then you grab both sides and pull. And you have a very cute gift bag. And I love that it has the box bottom. It looks just as good as any kind of circle. So there you go. Now, if you make any of these and post them on social media, I hope you tag me so I can see what combinations of fabric you use, what kind of drawstring you use. I love to see what people make.